Okay, what I'm going to do for the next 20 minutes or so is just give you an overview of organic waste and how that can actually link in with circular economy. What I was going to do is just give you a little bit of background to the circular economy, just to bring everything up to speed, and then to talk about some of the organic waste arisings that there are and the resources, and then some bioeconomy opportunities, because I think that's the really exciting thing that's starting to develop now, and it's really firing me up. And then just to talk a little bit about compost, digestate and soils, because they underpin all this bioresource economy. And then some of the challenges that I see, the things that the waste industry needs to do to perhaps begin to realise some of this. So firstly and foremost, I'm from the UK, and at the moment the UK is still part of the European Union, and the EU has actually developed a circular economy package which was published in 2015, and within that it's trying to set recycling targets, and hopefully if revisions to the Waste Framework Directive go through, it will also be requiring separate bio-waste collections as well across Europe. So that's really exciting from a European point of view. We have organisations such as the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in the UK that has recently published a report on urban biocycles. But work that I've been involved with on behalf of ISWA, the International Solid Waste Association, has been the task force on resource management, and some of the work that we did in 2015 looking at different aspects of the circular economy, and in particular from a waste management perspective. There were 6 reports published, and I've put a few of Report 6 out there on resources and opportunities, which is the final summary report, but they can all be downloaded from the ISWA website as well. In particular, I was involved in researching and writing Task Force Report number 4, Carbon, Nutrients and Soils. And we really looked at the estimated arisings of waste and organic waste within OECD countries, and OECD countries also does include Australia, so you're included in that. We looked at the amount of carbon that's potentially in these wastes and also the nutrients in them as well, and what can we do with them. So as you know, organic waste is quite a complex waste stream, perhaps more complex than any of the others just because of its variability. In nature, there's a complex flow of nutrients and carbon, and we can see here where we've got plants going up to forming green waste, also food waste as well, and how in our society we have the complex interplay between crops, manures, animal wastes, all coming up to forming these organic wastes that actually cause a lot of problems in landfill sites and challenges for collection as well. At the moment, most of the green waste is either just composted, we've got food waste which is now being anaerobically digested, and then going back onto soils and a bit of energy. But for me, the exciting thing is now starting to look at some of these bio-based products that can be made out of these organic materials. And there's really significant benefits associated with them. But first, just looking at waste arisings, how much organic waste do we have in the OECD? Well, actually, it's a little difficult to really get a good feeling. We do have very poor data sets. Some of the municipal wastes are easier to identify, but then looking at what percentage of that will actually be organic waste, well, we need to make a bit of an estimate based on percentages and estimates. And I think the World Bank assumed that something like 20%, 27% of municipal solid waste is the organic fraction on average across the OECD, but that can range quite significantly from somewhere like 14 to 56%. So huge variation here just in trying to get some estimates. We know once again that there's quite a lot of animal and food wastes out there, and understanding the commercial and industrial waste sources is very difficult, often because the record keeping is not done by local authorities and municipalities. It's vested in with the industries themselves. So once again, getting a feel for that, we've got some estimate across the EU there, and I know this is something that the UK has had to address over the last 5 years or so to get a much better handle on how much food waste is there out there, how much organic waste. Manures as well, significant quantities, but a lot of that's left in situ, so how much of that is realistically available potentially for collection and treatment, and also crop residues as well. So potentially phenomenally large, but we wouldn't want to collect them all because leaving them in situ is probably better for the soil. So getting a feel for how much can potentially be collected and used is quite tricky. But I think the bottom line is there is lots of it, lots and lots and lots of it. And a lot of it is actually untapped as well. Just using OECD data, we're probably estimating that somewhere in the region of about 177 million tonnes a year of organic fraction of municipal solid waste is out there. And if we look at potentially capturing 70% of that, that translates down to about 124 million tonnes. That's a lot of carbon, and that's a lot of nutrients that we could do something with. If we look at the total, just that 177 million tonnes, that potentially contains 14% of the total nitrogen fertiliser which is applied to agricultural land across 23 OECD countries. So we're talking a lot of nitrogen here. And if you bear in mind that the nitrogen that's actually manufactured through the Haber-Bosch process to produce inorganic nitrogen fertilisers accounts for somewhere between 1 and 2% of total greenhouse gas emissions globally, that's a significant potential saving there just on greenhouse gas emissions from manufacturing process. So it has big impact there on climate change. Currently, there's about 66 million tonnes composted, digested, based on OECD data. That can almost be doubled, adding an extra 58 million tonnes that's untapped, just from the municipal solid waste fraction. That excludes, of course, all the commercial and industrial waste, which is largely unknown at the moment. So lots and lots of carbon, lots and lots of nitrogen as well. So what does this mean if we're going to start doing something with it? And at best, we have materials at the bottom, these low-value, high-volume products being produced. If we're lucky, some of this organic waste is being composted, some of it is being digested. And we're getting a lot of compost and digestate out, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing against it. But now what we're starting to see a move to producing more medium value, medium volume products. For example, biogas, we're starting to see that. Some of the commodity chemicals from the carboxylic acid platform are starting to be produced and starting to look at manufacturing those in digesters. Struvite as well, I'll talk about that in a minute, and potentially precursors there for bioplastics. So there's big potential there to start moving the carbon and the nutrients in these organic wastes up this chain into here. And also some of the high volume, low volume products such as limonene from citrus fruit peel is being manufactured as well. So instead of it being produced chemically. But I see the real potential here in moving up towards this. Just a little figure out from some European Commission data published in 2013. You can see, so the data are probably a good few years before that. But the biggest growth potentially is going to be in bio-based plastics, and that's really where the main drivers are going to be. I think these are global figures as well, so not just European, but ones published by the Commission. So we can see that that's really where they're expecting that main growth to be for bio-based plastics. And some examples in action then. Struvite, as I've alluded to before. Struvite is ammonium magnesium phosphate. It is produced as a byproduct in anaerobic digesters and actually causes some of the digester operators significant problems because it clogs up pipes and can affect the process. But if you get it right and you can manufacture an organic fertilizer, high in phosphorus, high in nitrogen as well. And it is actually being produced commercially. It's being produced commercially in England at a sewage treatment work plant, and it's being produced commercially in mainland Europe as well, producing fine granules there that the farmers will identify with as a fertiliser. So that's exactly what it is. And the plant in the UK is actually saving in excess of 400,000 Australian dollars every year just by reducing corrosion and erosion in the tanks and also sale of the product as well. So significant potential. One project that's really interesting me at the moment is the production of polybeta hydroxyalkanoate, PHA, which is used as a bioplastic, a compostable plastic. It's a storage compound in bacteria. It's produced naturally. And you can see these occlusion bodies in this little picture here. And there's been some research work in the Netherlands in conjunction with with a commercial company, looking at actually manufacturing this as part of an anaerobic digestion facility. And the price of, no, the value of this, oops, sorry, sorry, I'm pressing the, need to go back. Sorry, pressed the wrong button there. So the value of this is far in excess of the value of the biogas, even with the levy and the subsidies on the biogas. So yeah, I think that's really exciting development. Still at a pilot plant stage, but I'm really hoping that we're going to start seeing that as a way forward. And last but not least, I did say we're starting to move away from compost and digestate, but there's always going to be a role for these products. What we find, and it's not just in the UK, I suspect it's in Australia as well, and it's also in mainland Europe, is that the nutrients in the compost and digestate are being undersold. We can calculate the fertiliser value in the product, but we know that compost and digestate has been sold for much, much lower than the actual nutrient value and the value that farmers will be paying just to buy these in as NPK fertilisers. And we're probably looking, you know, in the region of only about 30% of the potential based on the fertiliser equivalent, based on fertiliser prices on the market being realised at the moment. So the nutrients are being undersold, and for me, one of the important things is that the value of that carbon, the carbon in the compost, and to a lesser extent in the digestate, is not being quantified at all. We're not selling those benefits. Let's put that into context here. We know that soil is being degraded, and there's some really quite stark figures here from a 2013 paper in Agriculture Journal, that 80% of the world's agricultural land suffers moderate to severe erosion, and that's across the board. That's not just in sub-Saharan Africa or in parts of the world where the land is under stress. We know that it's occurring across the board, and it's occurring in the UK, and we know it's occurring in Australia as well. Somewhere in the region of 30 to 70% decline of soil organic matter in Australian soils based on your 2011 State of the Environment report. So it's a big threat, and it's a big threat that is actually underpinning and potentially putting food security into question as well, the land on which our food is being produced. The Waste and Resources Action Programme in the UK has done some really good work over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and they published some reports last year, DC Agri reports, which are available on the RAP website. So I'll give Richard a plug now while he's sitting there at the back. But the important thing for me is just looking at that little graph there. Green waste compost, 9 years application, putting it on every year, it's something like about 20, 30 tonnes per hectare. That increased the soil organic matter content just under 25%. And if you consider that next to farmyard manures over 20 years, it's had a much greater increase. So really important work there, and I think a lot of work that we can look at to improve on again in the future. In terms of the circular economy, so all of this is really good, and it's really exciting, and really aspirational, but what does that mean for waste managers and for the waste management sector? Well, I think we need to see a number of things if we're going to start realising all this potential. We certainly need to increase capture rates, over 50 million tonnes potentially, or just of the municipal organics across the OECD are still not being collected. So we need to increase capture rates. We need more collection schemes. We need to improve our data set, without a doubt. We have good data in some parts, but not in others. And we need to start integrating that with other sectors. And I think that's one of the key things for me as well, is that integration. We're not just dealing about waste management anymore. We're resource managers, and we are acting along that supply chain. We can be starting to manufacture products that can then dovetail into existing processes, into the chemicals industry, potentially the petroleum products industry, the agricultural sector, without a doubt. So we need to start thinking that we've got carbon and nutrients that we can add value to. We need to improve the quality of it. We heard this morning about poor quality going onto soils. Quality is absolutely fundamental. We're providing precursors, we're providing chemicals that will go into manufacturing product processes. And if we do that, we can't provide them with crappy stuff. It has to be good quality. So we need to improve the separate collection efficiencies and the effectiveness of it. Research and development to improve pre-treatment, I really think that's a big gap at the moment for the industry, something that we need to really look at. How can we really maximise that before the material hits the digesters and the compost plants? Underneath that, quality specifications, absolutely fundamental. Standard specifications for individual products is going to be fundamental, because manufacturers won't buy materials unless they know what it is and unless they know it's consistent. Integrating with other sectors, exploiting synergies that might well exist, for example, with the bioplastics manufacturers, and I know that's starting to occur, and widening the different types of treatment techniques, looking at innovation as well. So we do need to see some seed funding, I think, there to try to overcome some of those technological barriers. But surrounding all of this, communications, obviously that's going to be key, but also looking at skills, knowledge and occupational competencies as well. And you know, we're not just about waste, we're not just picking it up and moving it around and shoveling it around in terms of collection, treatment and disposal. We do need to see some embracing occupational competencies that, for example, exist in the petroleum products industry and in the chemicals industries as well. So really, to conclude this little talk, I think we have significant quantities of both carbon and nutrients and organic wastes. We still don't know exactly how much, but we know there's lots of it, and lots of it. Some of the carbon and the nutrients can be extracted and transformed into new products, and we can start to look at much more higher value products through biorefining. You probably hear about biorefineries and biotechnological processes. And we do need to start thinking about how we can do that. There's significant potential still within the compost and the digestate sectors to increase soil organic matter. And from my point of view, we need to start to look at quantifying the benefits of that carbon so we can start to talk to farmers in economic terms. I think to realise this, policy and fiscal incentives are needed to stimulate demand, overcome investment and technical barriers, because there will be lots and lots of them that we just can't foresee at the moment, and partnerships with other sectors, in particular the chemicals industry. Core competencies of the people involved. Waste managers tend to just think in terms of waste terms, the energy people think in terms of energy terms, and I think we need to start to broaden that and look at standards and qualifications as well for the people involved. And new product standards, without a doubt. We have them for compost, we have them for digestate, but we need to start thinking about standards for other types of products. And just to wrap up, you know, we started off with this little diagram, but I think, you know, food waste collections in particular are going to be so important. Let's maximise the quality of those. Think about processing and recycling the carbons and nutrients in those. Starting to think about bio-based products, including compostable products and bioplastics, and ultimately returning the carbon and nutrients to soils. And one, almost as if soils are the elephant in the room, we allude to it, we think about it as waste management, but it's absolutely critical. It's underpinning all of this, and we really need to start thinking in terms of protecting and enhancing our soils as well. So a little bit of further information. Some of this work was commissioned by the International Solid Waste Association, ISWA. The task force reports are all there to download as PDFs if you're interested. Also did a little video called The Golden Resource, which is a little cheesy, but you know, it gets the message across to non-technical people. So thank you very much for your time, and hope you manage to stay at work.